different, and you should seek the advice of your own attorney before acting or making decisions. No attorney-client privilege applies to communications on this show, and no attorney-client relationship is created by calling or writing in. Attorney Rominger practices only in Pennsylvania and maintains his primary office in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Hey, good afternoon. Carl Rominger here, 540-0580. Call in with your legal questions. We'll be answering them here today for the next 2 hours or thereabouts. As you know, I'm live every Saturday from 1 to 3, so call in with, whatever you want to talk about. Did a dog bite your kid? Want to sue the neighbor? Got a custody case brewing? Or maybe you're like Joe, you got some alimony going on. What's going on, Joe?
Well, my wife decided that she might rather live with her mom than me, and I've got some questions about that. Number one, there's actually 3 questions, if you'll indulge me. One is,
sure.
When does she actually leave? I mean, if she leaves behind jewelry, clothes, personal items, is she gone?
I think she's gone when she's intending to domicile herself with her mother, and the fact that she left some indicia of prior residency behind doesn't really control the day.
Okay.
But it's always a factual question, isn't it?
Okay, yeah, it is. And question number 2, all 3 vehicles are in my name, and I guess she's planning on taking one of them with her. It still has money owed on it, still has a lien on it, and the insurance everything's in my name. Mm-hmm. I guess she can just go ahead and do that, though?
Well, you guys, how long you been married?
Around 30 years.
Yeah, well, okay, so everything acquired, whoever's name it's in, is all marital property, and the judge is going to say, if you got more than one vehicle, one spouse is going to get one, the other spouse is going to get one, and then we'll sort everything else out from there. Okay,
and one last question. I want to throw 3 numbers at you. My income, take home, her income, take home, and if she leaves, she's going to leave me with considerable bills every month. Mm-hmm. So I want to know if a judge would actually grant her alimony in this case. I make about $2,800. Of that, $300 is a vehicle allowance that the government looks at as non-taxable, as a complete wash. So basically, I'm bringing home $25 if you don't include the vehicle allowance. She brings home about $1,300 a month.
Right.
And so there's obviously disparity in the income, but the total amount of bills that I would have to pay, mortgage, my child's student loans, right. Insurance.
Here's the problem on alimony. There's no mathematical formula for it.
Okay.
If you're separated, it could just be spousal support, and then we just look at incomes for purposes of figuring out what, if all the children are out of high school, we'd use 40% of your difference in your net monthly incomes as spousal support. But alimony itself is a multi-factored test. And
but here's why I'm asking that, though. I'm looking at like $2,100 worth of bills a month on $2,500 to $2,800 worth of income. So I'm only left with about $500 or $600 disposable income. She's going to be left with $1,300 worth of disposable income.
How do you know the house is still going to be there?
Well, I'm talking about in the interim. We're not talking about divorce right now. She's just talking about leaving, but leaving me with all the bills.
Right.
And I think she's looking at trying to get some support as well.
Yeah, and in the interim, they're going to look at your income. They'll consider extraordinary bills, and if you're the one paying, say, for a child's education and or particularly, in this case, the mortgage on the house, that can also come in to be calculated as well. So it'll all come into play. But
have you ever seen a case where one makes more than the other, but the one's responsible for all the bills, but they might actually get some support as opposed to having to pay support on less disposable income than the other person has?
Potentially, because the rules allow for any particular case to be tweaked any particular way, but judges tend to shy away from that. So I wouldn't go in. I wouldn't walk into a support hearing in your situation unarmed.
Okay, but they would take into consideration that all those bills that I have to pay.
Take them into consideration.
If I'm left with $600 and she's left with $1,300, can you see a case where a judge is going to say I have to pay her?
Yeah, I can, and that's why I'm trying to say to you is I wouldn't just walk in there because the guidelines favor an income-driven scenario, and we just assume you're going to pay your bills or not pay your bills, sink or swim. You've got to get it. You've got to get back into the discretionary aspects of the support court. And so all I'm trying to tell you is yes, I could see a situation where a judge would dial it back based on your actual situation, but I can also see a hearing officer or a judge event just going, no, I'm not really going to pay attention to the details, and I don't really care about your sob story. Here's the support guideline-driven numbers, and live with it, because I see that happen sometimes. And so my point is, I would be prepared to document all that very carefully. I'd be prepared to make my arguments, and I wouldn't take it lightly, because yes, I could see them simply going, yeah, we don't care, sell the house, move out, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Well, and and the funny thing is, could they order that? Because I would go along with that.
In a divorce, they can force the sale of the house. Yeah, absolutely.
But in the interim, I don't think she'd approve that.
Well, and then we have the ability in a divorce situation to go to the court and ask for asset by asset disposition. So we could say, hey, Judge, we really can't afford the house. Mama doesn't want to help list it, but let's list it.
Okay, so the judge could order it done then.
Yep.
Okay, great.
All right, Joe.
All right. Hey, thank you.
Thank you. 540-0580. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. Of course, you can go to romingerlaw.com if you need to get hold of me off the air. Alan, you're on the air.
Hello.
Yes, Alan.
Yeah, I have a question for you. I've been divorced for about 13 years, and I've been paying child support and alimony. My son is about to graduate from high school, and part of the alimony is tied in with the child support. I pay X amount of dollars in child support, and then the rest of it is made up with alimony. That was for our agreement. And my question is, when I go back to the divorce master or whoever I go back to get the alimony taken away, obviously he's going to turn 18 and graduate. What are my odds of getting that terminated?
Well, the child support will terminate itself, right? But the alimony, if it's true indefinite alimony, then we just redo the whole test. Now, did she remarry?
No, she is not.
Cohabitating?
No.
No. You better get her a boyfriend. So we'd have to restart it from scratch. And now your agreement, did you guys agree on a number, or did a court set a number?
We had a total of what I should have paid in child support.
Right.
And so I could get somewhat of a tax break. We lowered the child support by the amount of alimony.
Okay. Interesting. And who set the alimony number? You guys just come up with it?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it was...
Well, the reason I'm asking is if your agreement says the alimony ends when the kids are 18, then it's easy. If the agreement says it's this amount of alimony forever, then you're in real trouble. And if it says it's this amount of alimony, but it can be changed by the court at any time, then it's just a full factors test.
It was that, and if she cohabitates.
Gotcha.
And it didn't say cohabitates with a man or woman. It just says cohabitate.
Cohabitate. Well, this day and age, I guess the word really has a bigger meaning anyhow, because you never know.
Correct.
All right, so yeah, my thoughts are you're going to have to just go through all the factors again, and interestingly, because you're not paying child support, that means you'll have more money available to pay alimony, right?
Is that the way you think it will get looked
that's
at?
Sometimes. Oh, yeah, that's absolutely something to consider. Absolutely something to consider. The flip side is she doesn't have the children either because they're now emancipated, theoretically, so she has less need for some alimony. Or because alimony also considers even though she's getting child support, it considers that she still has the maintenance, care, and support of the child in her care. So, yeah, it's just a full factors test, and alimony is what it is. I mean, it's that statutory basis with, I always say there's like 27 little ingredients in it, whatever the judge is most swayed by, but the other thing is you guys can always agree on a new amount, too.
But is there like a formula for like how many years you're married, how many years you get?
No mathematical formulas for alimony in Pennsylvania. And the time that a judge tried to do it, the Superior Court said that's an error. You can't use math. Got to use factors, whatever that means.
Okay.
All right, brother.
Thank you.
540-0580. I'll see you guys after the break.
Let's return to Weekend Appointment with Carl Rominger on WHP 580.
Hey, welcome back. 540-0580. Welcome to Weekend Appointment, the alimony edition. Catherine, what do you want to know?
Hello?
Yes, Catherine.
Hi. I've been married for 18 years.
Okay.
My husband's worth several million.
Okay.
I did not know that he owned a condo in South Florida
Okay.
for $800,000
Nice.
since 2008, and just found out. I did not know any of the tax returns or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean for me?
Well, are you currently married?
Separated.
You're separated. Well, it means that in the course of the divorce, I mean, if it was acquired during the marriage with marital monies, then you're probably part owner.
Okay, I never knew about any of the money. It was filed on joint tax returns.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean that's even if it was inherited money? Does that?
Oh, now inherited money is different because inherited money comes in kind of sideways as non-marital property. But then there's a question of whether it gets converted into marital property or not.
Well, is it converted into tax if he uses it on your tax returns?
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what you're saying because you don't pay tax on.
The income
on the income from that. Well, the income from that may belong to the marriage, yes.
Okay.
The principal may not, but the income may. It's a very fact-specific question, but it sounds like you should have an attorney picking it over for you.
Yes, right. I do have an attorney, but everything's pretty hush-hush right now, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He wants to get back together. Let's do all this all over again. Let's do counseling, and it's not going to happen.
Well, so go take him to the bank.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's always this fact-specific question. Okay. Jay wants to know about the alimony laws. What's going on, Jay?
Hey, Carl. I don't know if this is one of the things that kind of strike me is I'm happily married now, fortunately, but I've been through 2 divorces and years ago and made I don't know if it's a mistake of doing a separate maintenance agreement as opposed to alimony, letting them file for alimony, which, of course, would have been beneficial tax-wise to me. But it's kind of interesting. I don't really every state seems to have its own laws, and I don't, certain things I think should be, I'm not saying they should be federal, but they should be kind of consistent. It's almost like, there's a standard way of turning a screw,
Well, every state has its own divorce law.
Well, they have even traffic. Traffic's the one that kind of gets me because not only do you have to figure out what the laws are through every maybe state, sometimes in municipalities.
Like no cell phones in downtown Harrisburg.
Yeah, so I guess maybe I'm the only one that gets bothered by the illogical.
Well, but we have
system.
51 sovereigns in America, so you're going to have 51 ways of ruling the world.
Well, I realize that's the way it is, mainly based on history, but but actually, what I wanted to ask about, and I kind of get off the beaten path. There's so many things I want to ask about when I call. Somebody had mentioned earlier today, this I never figure out, that the age of majority is 18, and people are supposedly not forced, although nowadays they do, to pay for the kids' college.
Right.
Or to pay off the kids' college loans unless they've co-signed. Yet, in a divorce proceeding, you can be forced to do that. It's almost as if there are no written rules where the judges are given such leeway.
Well, Pennsylvania, you can't force a parent to pay for a college education in a divorce in Pennsylvania.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
You can in other states, though.
Well, there you go.
And our state took the position that the courts can't get involved because it violates equal protection for the parent, but it also violates equal protection for the kids as well. It allows one kid to get treated better simply because his parents are in a divorce than a kid whose parents stay intact.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, and I often think it's a constitutional issue. If you, for instance, the age of majority is 18, right? Mm-hmm. Not everywhere. I shouldn't say not everywhere, not in every instance. You can't go in a casino till you're 21. You can't drink till you're 21. And I'm wondering, has anybody ever kind of brought that issue up, as a constitutional?
Yeah, it's been.
For equal protection.
And the courts have said, well, that's okay. We got to draw a line somewhere, and the legislature is best able to do that, and therefore we do. And I'll give you an example. What you can be sent into a foreign land and shot at by enemy soldiers, but you're for some reason unable to drink a beer, right?
Yeah.
But that's the way the legislature cut the cookie, so to speak. And that's okay, because that's not a equal protection issue per se. But remember this as well: equal protection still has to have about a necessary governmental interest. And so, judges who are forced to retire at 70, for instance, complained about it and said, "Why should I be forced to retire at 70?" And the court said, "Well, we can do that because we're using it as a bright line cutoff." And my joke about that is there's probably some judges that should be retired at 60 for all the same reasons we want to retire some judges at 70. And there's others who just stay on the bench until they're 90, and they're just as good as a 50-year-old.
Well, the thing about that, of course, it's not consistent because take the Supreme Court, where I don't know if the rest of
federal levels for life. We don't have any retirement in the federal court system.
Okay, I didn't know that.
51st sovereign. See how that works?
I would go nuts, I think, as a legislator, because I would want to craft logical laws, but I know politicians are in it for themselves. I mean, they probably have nice intentions, good intentions, but
some do.
Some of the stuff that gets drafted is just...
Some do. Jay, I mean, but the long and short of it is there's going to be a lot of inconsistency amongst jurisdictions. There's going to be a lot of internal inconsistencies amongst laws. I mean, just look at all the different ways we break down what age you can do what things at.
Yeah.
There's no great... Well, and here's the dealio. I mean, again, there's 23-year-olds who are less responsible than some 15-year-olds, but one of them can drive a car and drive the car drunk, and the other one can't. So,
okay, well, that's the way it is, obviously. But I like to talk about it.
All right.
Okay, thanks.
All right, brother. Take care. 540-0580. Carl Rominger here taking your questions. Of course, if you heard me on Durgan this past week and you want to comment on anything we talked about on Wednesday or Friday, I'm happy to do that. Doug, you're on the air.
Hi, Carl. I just want to talk about the Second Amendment and why I know the government will explain to me why it is that government at any level are just able to ignore the Constitution, whether it's the federal or the state. I mean, in Pennsylvania, I believe it says the right of the people to keep them for arms for defense of themselves or the state shall not be questioned, yet we have to apply for a permit to exercise that right.
Well,
same with the Second Amendment. I mean, if you had to apply to the state for a permit to go to church and worship, we wouldn't stand for it. We wouldn't stand for having to get a permit to write a letter to the editor. Why do we stand for this, and why is this allowed?
Short answer is the Constitution is a series of negative prescriptions, some of which seem to be given more strength than others. And, I mean, for instance, I always like to pull out the Fourth Amendment as a good example. It says you have the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. Well, the very phrasing of the Fourth Amendment suggests that some searches and seizures must be reasonable and some must not be. And so then the courts have just spent the last couple hundred years trying to figure out what that means. Other times they'll take another amendment, like the Fifth Amendment right to remain silent, and say that's an absolute right, and there's no balancing test. The Second Amendment, the Supreme Court finally recognized is a fundamental right, but then left open what the balancing tests would be, what standard of review would apply, and under what circumstances the government could regulate the right to bear arms, and so far has refused to intervene in some of the lower court cases. So I don't know what the final shakedown is going to be, but it looks like the Second Amendment's shaping up to be more like the Fourth Amendment, one that's malleable, at least in the court.
I don't understand that because the word shall not be infringed and shall not be questioned seem pretty clear to me, but then I don't have a fancy education where I have to dither over the definition of is.
I told you I was in front of a judge the other day, and I said, but the statute says you shall, and she's like, oh, I know that, but this is procedural, and we're going to do what we're going to do. And I'm like, well, so much for non-activist judges. That was a Tom Ridge appointee, by the way.
Yeah. Say again?
That was a Tom Ridge appointee that did that. I was
Your question the other day about whether you have to register guns in Pennsylvania, there was a case 2 years ago, I believe it was the state police and Mellon University were using instant background check information to develop a database and maps to the homes of gun owners, and I believe the NRA sued them and stopped them because it's against the law for governments to maintain a database of gun owners. I mean, it was written into the was the Brady bill that came up with the instant background check?
Well, it was, but I mean, our Pennsylvania system, the courts have battled that. They do allow them to keep kind of a, what do I want to say? Keep kind of a database.
Yeah. Again, the laws don't matter to us.
But here's the question. I mean, we have a Republican governor. He could order the chief of the state police to stop doing it, right? So, if all the
absolutely.
So our Republican governor and his chief of police that he just appointed, who came from the Attorney General's office with him, I guarantee you those guys aren't going to ditch the state police gun control list. Watch. They won't do it.
No.
So they can't trust the Republicans either.
It's curious to me that citizens are expected to respect the law when the people that make the law and are supposed to be the ones upholding it don't respect it themselves. It's always been curious to me.
I know.
There was a case years ago. I don't know if you're familiar with it. If I remember right, it was here in Pennsylvania. A man was involved in a shooting and was tried and acquitted. The jury found that it was self-defense. And the judge wouldn't return his gun, was ordered the gun to be destroyed. And the man sued to get his gun back, and the higher court said that by withholding his gun, that was the same as imposing a fine for a crime over which he was acquitted.
Right.
Are you familiar with that case? Was that a Pennsylvania case?
I don't think that was a Pennsylvania case, but I could be wrong about that. But I remember reading about that. And, again, this is the entire the entire problem we have. I mean, the police want to seize these guns, and they don't want to ever give them back. And it is a problem, and people need to pursue that more often. I'm very surprised to learn quite often of people who've just let the government take stuff they own and not looked for it or tried to get it back.
Yeah.
All right, my friend, I got to go to break.
All right, well, thanks for your time, Carl.
All right,
I know I'll never get a...
Well, Doug, all I can tell you is that remember this. I mean, think about this. Here's a question for you. The right to bear arms. What arm did they mean? Did they mean a long arm? Did they mean a machete? Did they mean a pistol? Did they mean...
The Supreme Court decided that.
Well, I mean, they said...
Years ago, they said the only arms that the Second Amendment supports are those that would be appropriate for militia duty.
Right.
They decided that in a case about sawed-off shotgun.
And that's the big... That's the big question. So now these days, right, if my militia's going to... Shouldn't the militia's weapons get better over time? The Army's does.
It seems to me that the most current M16 or M4 should be the gun that we're allowed to keep in our homes, because that's
you would
what
think.
We would need if we were calling for militia.
Well,
I mean,
unless of course the Leviathan wants their standing army better armed than the People's Militia. All right, got to go to break. 540-0580.
Let's return to Weekend Appointment with Carl Rominger on WHP 580.
Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. 540-0580. Whatever you guys want to talk about, you got a legal problem, call in. We'll answer it here on the air. We've been doing alimony and guns so far, but we'll talk about car accidents, auto insurance, neighbors' fences. Jim, you're on the air.
Yeah, hi, Carl. I got a question for you. I bought a piece of ground, piece of land that is it's been left fallow for many years, so a lot of the locals have decided that they were going to use it to hunt on it. And last year when I acquired it, I posted the land, and within 2 weeks, all my signs were taken down.
Huh.
So I reposted the land, and I found out the facility manager, who has a property that juxtaposes the top of my mountain, spoke with him and kind of read him the riot act, and that seemed to have scared some people off. My question is this. I talked to a game warden and the game commission, and they told me that if I catch someone on the property, that's not a game commission issue unless they're poaching. And most of these guys are hunting, and they're hunting legally. So then it becomes trespassing issue.
Crimes code, yeah.
The question that I have is, would I call the local police or the state police?
Well, it depends. If there's a local police department that polices the area, you can start with them. The state police you could also call, but the state police have statewide jurisdiction, but they'll usually defer to a township if there's one available. In other words, they're going to say, hey, if you live in Middlesex Township, call the Middlesex Police Department.
Yes. The second question that I would have then is, I carry, and when I'm on my property, I carry. So if I confronted a trespasser, how would you handle that? What are my legalities as far as I can't pull my gun on him, or unless I was in fear of my life.
Right.
Right now it's bow season, so he'd have a bow, I'd have a gun, I'd win. But how do you handle that?
Well, that's always an interesting question. I was hunting on a farm last year when some yahoo who was also hunting the farm with permission, but of course thought that somehow they'd vested him as the land warden or something. Came marching over, and you're like, well, this cracker's got a gun. What do I just kind of do with my gun here? I don't know. I'm not going to take it off my shoulder and make a hostile. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So you just kind of have a conversation. So my thought on the matter is obviously if you have a gun, and if you're carrying a rifle, carrying a long arm in your hands, when I hunt, I don't rarely have it on my shoulder because I'm always at ready.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody that hunts with me knows that.
Yes.
But that said, if it's on your shoulder, I don't think you want to take it off. If it's in a holster, I don't think you want to take it out unless the person starts to do something where you have true apprehension. And otherwise, you just kind of explain the situation. The other thing is if they become irrational, I might want to put my back to them, but I don't think I want to try to escalate it either. So at that point, it's just when we'll just call the police here. I got this wonderful thing called a cell phone. We'll let them know we got a trespasser and move on from there.
Right.
And the best thing you can do is, he's got to park somewhere. So if you can find the vehicle, you can get the license plate and get the identity too.
Yes. Okay. But as far as escorting them off the property, I
wouldn't recommend that. I just let them stay. Let them stay. That way, by the time the police get there, you can get them to the car. They can be there to talk to the police officer. You escort them off the property yourself. You're always risking the potential interaction.
Yes. Good. Okay.
All right.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Always better to be safe than sorry. You don't really want to have too much interaction. 540-0580 is the talk line number. If you want to call in and talk about a legal problem, we'll answer it here on the air. What was I talking about with the Durgan audience yesterday? The Supreme Court of the United States is going to be taking up the health care law. At least that's what we believe. And I'm predicting that it will be found to be constitutional under a line of cases that were authored by the conservative majority, including John Roberts, who recently said that you have, as a Congress, the power to make any law you want that not only affects commerce, but is, quote, necessary and proper to otherwise effectuate anything you need to do. And that's a clause that's different than the Commerce Clause. It's the necessary and proper clause. And so I'm kind of predicting that. So I just want to keep saying that on the air so you guys can either call me up and tell me I was wrong, or I can say, nope, look, Supreme Court's going to side with President Obama on that one, and it's not going to be the justices you expected. It's not going to be Elena Kagan. It's going to be John Roberts and or a couple of the other conservative justices joining in because they seem to be very predisposed to finding the powers of the president and the Congress to be strong in the Constitution. Ryan, you're on the air.
Hi.
You got a question for me?
Yeah, I was hunting Wednesday night. I'm a coon hunter.
Okay.
My dog is hunting with is trying a female dog from a buddy of mine in Maryland. She's a $1,000 dog anyway. I have permission to hunt this private property, and she got out about 0.8 of a mile. I have a GPS tracking collar on her, and my young dog treed, and he's about 400 yards away. So I went down to my young dog first, and I was headed over to that other dog, and on the GPS, I started getting closer to a house, and I seen, and so I had another friend with me, and I leashed up my young dog, and he said, you stay here, and I'll go check it out. And sure as shit, the landowner shot my dog twice.
Ooh. Did you just say that? Don't say that word now. You don't want to say that, I don't think. Anyhow, so is your dog dead?
No, she is still alive. It was shot with a .22, he told the cops he only shot once. The veterinarian said there's 2 separate bullet wounds. The wounds do not connect together. She has, lead from the 22 in her chest cavity. I have her at home. I'm taking care of her via the vet's instructions. So I'm wondering if I have a lawsuit here.
Yeah, you do. What's the landowner's theory of why they shot the dog?
Well, he has a deer pen.
Okay.
I guess he has, but, it has like a 10-foot high fence. Now, on my GPS caller, it says that she was treed. It has, it would say that she's on point, or she's treed, or she has her quarry, cornered. Well, so she was treeing, and she's a 5-year-old, she's a $1,000 coon dog. I mean, she's titled. She doesn't run trash. She doesn't run deer paws.
Right.
So she was treed, and then, it took me, of course, she was almost a mile away, so it took me like 15 minutes to get to her. So essentially, I had her under control. Whenever I found out she was close to the house, I tried to beep her with a shocking collar. She didn't respond, so I tried to shock her. And she wouldn't respond, because she had just been shot.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
yeah, here's the dealio. He absolutely, if he has livestock or animals he's raising and there's an animal in the act of harrying them or hurting them, he certainly is privileged potentially to shoot it, but it's going to become a fact-specific question. If your dog's outside the pen and in no real danger to the deer, he may have violated that, and therefore, he would be civilly liable to you for your damages, which could include your vet bills and the value of the dog if something happens to the dog.
Well, see, that they said there's potential with the lead being in her chest cavity that, later on something might happen. Now, like I said, I was, training this dog. I was hunting her on trial. You know what I mean? The guy gave me her for a week just to try to see if I wanted to buy her. Well, now he's not going to take her back.
Right, so you just bought the dog.
Exactly. And a vet bill, so now I'm out almost $2,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you have a potential lawsuit. I mean, it's just all going to come down to the facts. And unfortunately, the other guy's got one leg up on you because he was the only one there when the gun was fired. So, but
I have the evidence on there that said she was treed. I mean, she was standing up on a tree. She wasn't. And is deer considered livestock?
Well, I don't. That's another question I don't know the answer to off the top of my head. I mean, it is an agricultural product if you're doing it in the right circumstance, but that is an interesting question all by itself because we just had this issue come up where we were saying when the bear attacks your sheep, you can shoot the bear, but when the bear attacks your wife, you're not entitled by the same statute.
Yeah, what a crock of shit, right?
Oh, you can't say that, dude.
I apologize. So anyway, it says in the game code that unless it is caught, your dog is caught in the act of attacking a big game animal, you are not allowed to shoot.
Right.
So, like I said, I'm sitting here at your office. I need to. I'd like to hire you on as an attorney and take this matter to court. All right, brother. I got to let you go off the air here. Yep. All right. 540-0580. Hey, welcome back. Carl Rominger here. 540-0580. If you have a legal question, call in. We'll answer it here on the air. Did you see the Supreme Court? Now, we had a caller talking about this with Durgan's show the other day, but we had a Supreme Court who's taking up a case, and it involves a church, a Lutheran church school, and a teacher who taught mainly secular subjects, but also taught religion and led prayers. She took a leave of absence to get a sleep disorder or something taken care of, and the school was reluctant to let her return. She sued for a violation of the Americans with Disabilities Act, but they said that they removed her ability to be a preacher or to minister to the kids and lead the prayers, and therefore they don't have to follow the Americans with Disabilities Act because it violates their religious freedom. And there's something that this implicates called like the ministerial exception. I'm just thinking of stuff in my head, but basically what we've got going on is the court's going to decide can the government regulate and should the government get involved in whether or not the church's decision to keep somebody as a pastor or in a ministerial function is reviewable by a court. And traditionally, religious groups haven't had to follow anti-discrimination laws in their employment decisions about their leadership. What makes this case kind of a little different is this is a lower level employee who's
arguably they mainly taught secular curriculum and that their religious role was very small. So it would be like firing the janitor, I guess, is going to be the argument, and that the religiosity, to borrow from Bill Maher, of the janitor is not really at issue. Here, where the teacher has a quasi role, it's kind of interesting that maybe she does do some leadership of a religious nature by leading prayer with the kids, etc., and therefore they're free to fire her or hire her without fear of being regulated by employment law. And I know that this has been an exception that's been long-standing, and it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out. The other thing I saw that the Supreme Court was taking up had to do with a strip search case, I think out of Ohio or somewhere, where the fella is alleging that his Fourth Amendment rights were violated by an unreasonable search and seizure having to do with strip search. And I haven't read all the details on that, but I'm going to try to look it up and let you know, because if you remember a while back, the Dauphin County Prison, for instance, paid a very large settlement because they were strip searching anybody and everybody who was brought into the prison. And believe it or not, you can't just strip search anybody you want simply because they're going to be staying in your hotel, or in this case in your prison, simply on that basis alone. There has to be other individual indicia or suspicion. And that came up a few years ago when all those students and hippies and whatever else they were out on that island in the Susquehanna, and a kid tried to swim to shore and drowned. And if you want to get in on the conversation here, by the way, it's 540-0580, 540-0580. Call in with your legal questions. We'll get them answered here on the air. And, of course, I'm going to be on all the way through 3 o'clock, so we can keep answering them. But if you remember, this kid's swimming back, he drowns. The police go out and find this party on the island, which had been going on for years. There's like 600 kids there. And when I say kids, I mean loosely, 18 to 30. And they arrest a bunch of them. And, of course, here's the funny part. What they didn't realize, I guess, is they thought they were a bunch of hippie Rastafarians on ecstasy. But actually, a lot of them were young professionals, including one who worked for a justice on the Virginia Supreme Court, one whose father was a chief lobbyist for a very large Republican organization. And they all, of course, made the phone calls to their families, and the families were distraught to learn that their kids were being detained for something as silly as that. And that's how the big civil rights ball got rolling on that, because they basically, they weren't a bunch of crazy hippies. They apparently, in fact, a couple of them were lawyers themselves. So anyhow, I'm just rattling on to tell you about that, because it turns out our prison had been, our prison, the Dauphin County Prison, had been strip searching people just as a matter of course for many years. And it's funny how something like that never is raised as an issue until somebody else from out of town gets in trouble and says, wait a minute, that's not really the way you're allowed to do it. And so they've changed it out there. Stan, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger. What's going on?
Hey, Carl. I got a few questions about right-of-way in front of my house. I live in an area that's zoned as a residential forest, so the road comes right. There's no sidewalks. There's no curbs. And some portion of that, 12 feet or so, is designated as right-of-way. It's my property, but it's my responsibility to maintain it, just like if you have a sidewalk, you got to shovel it, I guess. Is that your understanding as well?
So which portion of the road?
It's not the road.
It's the right-of-way.
Grass.
Okay.
To the side of the road.
And they're saying you have to shovel that grass.
No. I'm sorry. I misspoken. I just have to maintain it.
Okay, right.
And but my question is, the right-of-way is primarily for utility companies. So
can you hold on, Stan? We got to go to break, but we'll talk about it on the other side.
Okay.
All right, hold on, brother. 540-0580. We're going to be here for another hour answering your legal questions. So if you have one, call in 540-0580. Carl Rominger here answering your questions on the air.